Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this chat with friends. This is a person that I feel like I've known for my entire gaming life. We were just talking before the call. I've been listening to this man for almost 10 years now via his old podcast, Ludology. He is a game designer of some of your favorites, including Space Cadets and the game that we're going to talk about today, which is Super Skill Pinball 4K, and I'm sure a couple of others as well. This is Geoff Engelstein. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. I'm excited to be here.
I would like to give a shout out to listener of the podcast, Corey Mayo, who pointed me to Jeff's Twitter, who, he just put out the call. I missed the call somehow. I do have this man followed, but, you can't check everything. And he's like, hey, he wants to talk. And he's a really good story. So go ahead, email him. And so thank you very much, Corey. I always appreciate and anyone else who has any suggestions for guests, anything like that, please go ahead. So we are going to get to our chat. But I think the first thing we need to do is a little bit of promo. Let's get the promo out of the way. The actual straight up, introduce yourself and how people can kind of find you and what you're offering to people. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what's up now. You are not doing Ludology, but you are active in the gaming universe.
Yeah, I'm doing a bunch of different things now in my kind of post-Ludology life. So I'm continuing the game designs. So I had two games come out over the last couple of months, Super Skill Pinball, which you mentioned, and Versailles 1919. Yep, there's Super Skill right there.
We will talk about Super Skill Pinball in a little bit, and we'll talk about the game. Well, actually, we'll get to the game talk in a little bit, but I'm going to make the people eat their vegetables first before we get to the candy.
So I got those coming out. I had those came out recently. Upcoming, hopefully in March or April. We're still working on it, but we're aiming for a Kickstarter for a new game that I do with my son, called Nova League, which we can talk about also. And then I've got my GameTek book, which is a collection of the essays that I do on the Dice Tower. Was published in a kind of a rough format back in 2017, but then it was picked up by HarperCollins, and they just actually recently republished it in the United States. It was first republished by HarperCollins in Australia, but now it's available in the US. So that just came out a couple months ago. And then in December, towards the end of this,
we can pause on the GameTek. This is what I meant by vegetables. We're going to talk about the books first. This is a channel about games, books, and life, and it was exciting to hear that there is games and books and life going to be all in this conversation.
There you go. We got it all.
Let's start with the book. So GameTek, that was in particular because obviously the first thing you encountered is a Dice Tower, and I encountered a Dice Tower podcast when you're first getting into games. And so I don't know how often you did it. I think you did it maybe once every couple of weeks or once a month or whatever the frequency was. And GameTek, if you don't know, was a 5 to 10 minute spot where you would kind of discourse upon something interesting to you from a very kind of high level game design perspective. And part of the running joke was, would Eric get it? So
yeah. So a couple of things about that. So first off, it goes back. So for my day job, so I do product development and manufacturing for people on a variety of different products. And so my business frequently took me over to Asia. And so way back in the day, I used to go to Korea a couple of times a year. And so I used to listen to the Dice Tower. And this is back when Tom lived in Korea and did it with first Joe and then with Sam. And so I just reached out to Tom one time. I was like, hey, I got a free evening. I'm going to be in Korea. I'm a big fan of the show. Would love to meet up with you. And he and Joe actually took the train down to Seoul. They're north of Seoul. So he took the train down to Seoul, met with me. We played some games, went to a game cafe, which was my first time ever in a board game cafe. Before they existed at all in the United States.
Nice.
And then after that, I used to, every time I went over there, I'd go up to his house or his game group, and we'd get together and play Twilight Imperium or whatever. We had a lot of good times. And one time he just mentioned to me that he was looking for new segments for the show and new contributors. And so I kind of wanted to kind of step beyond just playing and doing something. And I was always a big, I had a great interest in math and science, and I loved, thinking about how those related to games. And so I just came up with this idea, and I want to do something a little different. So I came up with this idea for GameTek for talking about math and science and psychology and all these different things and the way that they relate to games. Put together 3 sample segments and sent them off to Tom. And at the time, I thought maybe I could come up with 20 different ideas, maybe before I ran out.
Right.
And so that was in
300 episodes later.
That was in 2007, and here we are in 2020. Still doing it every 2 weeks. Yeah, I've done probably 300 or so. I don't even know anymore. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So yeah, it's been fun. And they're 5-minute segments. They feel like 10 minutes, but they're actually only 5 minutes.
Some of them, well, it takes me 10 minutes to understand some of them because like I'll listen to it and it's like, okay, what did he just say? Especially because okay, so the psychology ones I'm all over. I'm a psychotherapist. We will absolutely talk about that. That is my day job.
Cool.
So like, Prisoner's Dilemma and, there was one that you did. I think this may have been a bigger episode about like what happens to theme, like, the retheme of Ink and Gold into like a firefighting thing. And that was It was super interesting. Go ahead and check out Ludology and the GameTek if you want to know more. He was doing psychology stuff before I even thought about it. So,
yeah. And then I think that was actually turned into a real experiment after I came up with the whole story. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Super cool. But then the math ones, the astrophysics ones, and like when you try to describe AI, that's where it's like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I always feel not to, I'm not trying to dissuade you from expressing that or anything, but honestly, people say to me all the time, oh yeah, I love your stuff, I listen to it, I don't understand any of it, and I always feel like I've failed then, right? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach or trying to be pedagogical. I'm trying to help people make those connections with things they know in the games that they know and things they maybe don't know about to help it make it a little easier for people to learn. So I feel like if people don't get it or can't get it, then I haven't really done my job. So that's why I always try to do it. But it's hard in 5 minutes to explain quantum mechanics. Yeah.
So. Although what I will say, and this is a psychology thing, right? I think, or maybe a cultural thing. I think there is this kind of like, it's almost like expressing your innumeracy. So there's like illiteracy and innumeracy. So like, I can't do math. I'm the worst at math. That's its own kind of status symbol in our culture. Like, it's like, oh, I'm the worst at math. Don't make me do anything. So I feel like your segments kind of swim upstream against that very thing that we do. And I can't figure it out. I can't figure out why that's it. Have you noticed that it's almost like a status symbol when people say?
Yeah, I mean, some people certainly can. Yeah, will say that and do that, and I get that.
And your segments kind of feed that. So it's not like it's that they don't understand. It's like it becomes a status symbol that they don't understand. I'm glad
to help people get up to, advance their social status, get together and talk about how they just completely don't understand GameTek. Yeah.
Okay, good.
No, you go.
I guess how many GameTeks were collected in the HarperCollins book?
Well, it was interesting. So the original game, I did a Kickstarter, a 10-year anniversary Kickstarter back in 2017. And that one was very specifically, I think it was like 60 pieces, 60 essays or somewhere around that. Then when HarperCollins picked it up, so then one of the people who was an editor at HarperCollins actually, was also a fan of the show and saw the book and spoke to the people there and was like, hey, we should do this. And so they picked it up, but they totally smoothed it out. I mean, they blended together, like it was very much just it was pretty much transcripts of the segments, right?
Yeah.
Of the original book. The editor, whose name I can't recall right now, but he did a fantastic job of blending things together in a way that just is much more readable. And so that's the new version. That's the orange covered version that's out now. That's the only one that you can get at this point. So, and we added some new material for the HarperCollins one versus the first one because there were some newer segments that had come out in the meantime that I really liked. Do you have like a top 3? Or do we have to read the book for that? Like 3 that you just felt like, oh man, I nailed this one. This was amazing. I don't know if from that standpoint, but the ones that I always go back to, I mean, there was one about, I enjoyed the one I did about colonoscopies. It's one of my personal favorites.
No, I don't.
You know that story?
No, I don't.
Okay. So that study was from the 80s, I believe. this was back when they did colonoscopies. They didn't do it under general anesthesia, so you were awake for it. Okay, so they took people, and the normal procedure was like, I'll make up numbers, like 10 minutes long, right? Normal procedure is 10 minutes long, and the peak discomfort comes right at the very end of the procedure. Okay, so what they did is they asked people like every minute to give them a number from 1 to 10 of how uncomfortable they were. Then they did another set of people with a different procedure where the first 10 minutes were exactly the same, so it peaked up at the 10-minute point. But then instead of ending at 10 minutes, they let it go on for another 10 minutes, so it ended at 20 minutes. In the last 10 minutes, it was just more like a cooling down period, right? And then they asked people afterwards, like a week after, they asked them, what would you rate as the total discomfort that you had? And their hypothesis was that they would probably be roughly equal, or maybe the people that did the longer procedure would have more total discomfort because it was a 20-minute long thing that they were sitting through rather than a 10-minute long thing they were sitting through. But actually the people that did the 20 minutes in general rated it much better than the people where it ended at 10, even though the procedure was twice as long. And they were uncomfortable for twice as long. And they did a bunch of different experiments and eventually modeled it that the best approximation for the people's remembering of the discomfort was an average between the worst discomfort at any point and the discomfort at the very end. Okay, if you average those two numbers, that's how people remember things. Wow, it's not necessarily how they experience it at the time, but that's how they remember it. So the 10-minute one, the peak and the end are at the same time, so it's remembered as much worse than the other one. And then the longer one that's got the peak in the middle. And that's really kind of informed a lot of my game design. Well, most of my game design is now modeled after colonoscopies. In that, I really try to make sure, ever since I kind of read that, it actually I was in the middle of doing Space Cadets and I tweaked a lot. We changed a lot because when I read that, I was like, oh my God, we're falling prey to this. Is you want to make sure you've got your best moments right at the end.
Right. Okay.
And it makes sense if you think about it. Like if I go to see a movie, right? If I'm going to see a thriller, right? If the best moment in the movie is in the middle of the movie, and then it's a mediocre ending, I'm going to be much less happy than if it's a mediocre middle and a great ending, right? The ending is super important. And a lot of games I play kind of fizzle out at the end. The last couple of turns, you feel like you're just going through the motions and you're doing stuff or whatever, right? And I think that a lot of designs suffer for that. And if you, you need a designer to focus on making that ending pretty exciting.
I will actually, wow, I can actually counter that a little bit.
Sure.
So I am a solo player, and we vote on the solo games of the year and the one player gun on BDG, right? And the number one solo game for 2 years running, I don't think it will be dethroned. I have it up here. It is Spirit Island. So Spirit Island has an issue where the ending isn't that good. So, like, have you played Spirit Island?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're doing the things. I
haven't played it solo, but I've played it with other people. Yeah.
So you're doing all the things, right? You're doing the card play and you're setting things up and you're setting up combos, and there will be a point kind of like in that mid to end game where like, you have the big move and you sweep the colonist away with the tsunami and you do whatever, and then like the last couple of turns are either pro forma or like you've just kind of like eased into the win condition, and like, oh wow, that was interesting. And there's a couple of solo games that are like that. So it's almost like there's a couple of solo games that more equate to puzzles, and it equates to what you were saying before about the whole thing about like the difference between the peak experience and the end. The peak experience is so high that the end could be okay. Right, that the end could only be okay, and I think that
it's an average. It is an average of the two, right? Exactly. And it also depends on how close the peak is to the end. So, like, if you're doing, like, there's many types of puzzles that get easier as you go, right? The beginning part of the puzzle, but once you like unlock it and you get like halfway through, then it's like a downhill skate, right?
Right.
But the halfway point is not halfway in time. Usually, you're spending like 3/4 on the first half and 1/4 on the last half, right? So, so there's different curves and stuff like that. But I think.
Like like a Sudoku puzzle, right? There's usually like a box or two that is the most challenging thing. So like you've filled in your numbers that are like easier, and then you're like, there's like a zone or two that's like, "Ugh," and you spend all that time there, and then once you find that number, then the whole thing kind of like adds up and like flows in. So like I remember that box. I don't need the end of Sudoku to be exciting.
Right, but you need it
You
to be
know?
quick.
Yes, I
That's the
need it to
difference,
come
right?
fairly quickly after the end.
Right,
Yes.
if it drags on after that, that's when it's going to be a problem.
Hmm.
So you want to bring that best moment as close as possible to the end. I mean, even in a movie, after the climax, there's still usually a little bit more, but they keep it quick.
Well, I mean, unless you're at Lord of the Rings and you have the whole
I was going to say Lord of the Rings, exactly. And people are still talking about it now, right? It's like, oh, it's still not over? Really?
Yeah, and actually, and I guess you can have the counter study is like Game of Thrones, a TV show. So like you could argue that the show climaxed in seasons 3 and 4
Mm-hmm.
with like the Red Wedding and I'm not going to spoil anything if you guys want to go back there, but nobody wants to go back there. Why? Because it climaxed in season 3 and 4, and then the rest of it was this long, slow descent into mediocrity, and then the ending was just like, what was that? So you see, literally no people are going back in the way they're going back to see Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or any these other properties. And I guess your colonoscopy thing really explains that, because there was too much distance between the best of the show and the end of it.
Yeah. So that was one of them. You wanted 3, right?
Yeah.
Another one was that I've always liked.
We have to get back to the GameTek.
Yeah, right.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Well, just quickly then. I mean, the other ones were, that I really liked was I did one about Kepler, Johannes Kepler.
Yeah.
And his Mysterium Cosmographum theory, which, for those that are not familiar, I mean, he studied the motions of the planets, and they just started finally, realizing about the heliocentric system and how far the planets were from the sun. They started putting all those numbers together, and he was trying to figure out, make rhyme or reason of the distance that all the planets were from the sun, and he tried all kinds of different things, and he found out that if you nested polyhedral dice, basically, if you put like a tetrahedron inside a cube, inside a 12-sider, inside a 20-sider, right, that the radius of all those things matched up pretty well with the distance of the planets from the sun. Because it was only 5 at that point. It only went out to Saturn, was the furthest one that could be seen with the naked eye. Mm-hmm. And so the pictures that he drew of it are just really cool, showing all those nested dice. And, he felt like, as he put it, that he was like, staring into the face of God, that he like uncovered this incredible mystical rule and published it and was super excited about it and felt like he had the key to the universe. Until like, 5 or 10 years later, when they started taking better measurements and found out that they don't actually move in circles, that the planets all move in ellipses. And, and the numbers no longer matched up with his dice polyhedron theory. But he took the new data and he threw his theory away and came, no matter the beauty of it, he took the facts and he said, hey, this is reality. There's no model for it. What I thought was true is not true, and just went on with the rest of his life. And I think that's an important lesson for everybody to try to take. Is you can have things may look beautiful, or you may have cherished theories about a lot of different things in our lives, and so you just have to face reality sometimes and adjust your perception based on what's really out there.
And human psychology is built to go exactly against that. Like we are built to build our towers and to love our towers and love our cities. Just and as a psychotherapist, that is exactly like my thing is. I end every video on this: change your mind, you can change the world, right? And there are that is the essential thing of my psychotherapy is people who just have such a hard time changing their minds. Because it makes sense.
Hard. I understand that it's hard, and
right.
People get into preconceived notions and things like that, but. I was. It's been attributed to a lot of people. I think originally it was Keynes. I think John Maynard Keynes. It was attributed to as the quote. Somebody asked him. I forget the exact thing, but it was like how you don't how could you have flip-flopped basically whatever the 1920s term was. How could you flip-flop in this opinion? And he responded to him. He says, well. He says, when I am presented with new information, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? When I'm presented with new facts. So, yeah. So that was one. And the third one just, I don't know if I guess it kind of resonated with people because people came up to me afterwards, but mainly it's because I did it live and I was emotional at the time. But when I was 49, I guess, yeah, I was 49 and I did a live GameTek at Gen Con. And I talked about what I like to call in engine building games, the pivot moment, like in Splendor, right? Or in Dominion, right? At some point you've got to stop building your engine and you've got to start using it to get points.
Yeah, score.
And I kind of pivoted from that into the fact that it was actually on my birthday that I was doing it, 49. And I talked about how I've always measured milestones on my birthday by perfect squares. Actually, usually good things happen to me when I'm 9, 16, 25, 36, and 49. So it was a big one for me, but I said that, at this point that I want to pivot from kind of building my engine up to that point to executing, to doing it. And for me, that was trying to make a difference, about trying to, as much as I like teaching already, but, try to just get into more things and turn it into more output that I hope would help other people in the future. And that was like 7 years ago now. And I really tried to, push through on that. And that's, when I started teaching with NYU, and I teach game design there, and writing the books and helping to mentor people. And we started a couple of years ago, started the New Voices in Gaming Foundation to try to offer scholarships to underrepresented designers to, get out and get some of these opportunities to meet people and be mentored and things like that. So, and now the New Zenobia Award, that I'm on the board for that. So I've really been trying to, kind of use the equity that I've built up to, hopefully make things better for other people.
It sounds, are you aware of like Steven Erickson's developmental life cycle?
No, I'm not.
So you, in that one live thing, it sounds like you went from stage 7 to stage 8.
Okay.
So a stage, I hope you guys are interested in this. This is very different than anything I've done. So
we'll get to the games. We'll get to the games. And I was 7. My age was 7 squared. So I guess that was the end of stage 7.
There you go. Exactly. I gotta math that out, actually. That's really interesting. So then the developmental stages, it goes from birth to death. He was a Freudian, so like they a lot of talk about stages. So a little bit further, a little back in the 20th century. So then like every stage has a task. So like the first stage, when you're a baby, is you have to learn to trust. Right? You don't trust anything. You have to learn to trust. And then, you become the little one, and then you learn to explore. That's the task, like explore. And then you go to, different stages. And like, if you're a teenager, you learn to identify yourself. If you're a young adult, you learn to love. And if you're an adult, you learn to like build. As you were saying before, like, build that engine. So like they call it generativity. So it's like, you learn to generate. Right. And then, so what are you generating? You're generating your children, and you're generating at your job, and you're kind of establishing a legacy. And that's stage 7. And then stage 8, the last stage, is kind of like solidifying your legacy, so to speak, your impact. So like, you've built. Now what kind of impact are you having? And It's so funny how you described exactly going from stage 7 to stage 8. And it's this theory they make you memorize as a psychotherapist to take your license. So it's like, memorize the 8 stages. And but I found so much usefulness, because it's like, wow, this actually applies. I know a lot of people that are trying to like find meaning in their later years as they kind of near retirement. Like, what am I going to do now? Kind of thing. And it's like, well, make an impact.
Yeah. So yeah, and I've been very, it's been a gratifying, part of the journey that I'm looking forward to continuing.
Say a little bit more about the scholarship. Obviously, as a person of color, I'm Latino, very interested in just having more voices, more diversity. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your scholarship is kind of getting the word out and getting people in the hobby.
Yeah, it started out, we had our first round, I guess 3 years ago now, something like that. And we partnered with Tabletop Network. So Tabletop Network, which was started, was mainly the brainchild of designer Tim Fowers, who did Burgle Brothers, and there you go.
There you go. I got plenty of.
Yep. Now
I have
boarding.
more. I have more Tim Fowers than Geoff Engelstein, unfortunately, on my shelves.
Hey, that's he's a better designer than I am, so that is deserved.
He designs
Uh,
cooperative games. That's my jam. Is cooperative games.
um, And so we did the first. I helped, kind of organize it, and it was intended to be. I don't. There's a big video game conference called GDC, where they bring in people to do papers and presentations and stuff
Game
like that.
Developers Conference. Yeah.
So he had this vision of doing a similar one for tabletop designers, and it wouldn't be just playtesting. It wouldn't be, it wasn't going to be exhibitors. It wasn't going to be just playing games all day, right? Tournaments. He wanted to do something different. Where it's going to strictly be educational, and there would just be people coming and giving lectures and panels and breakout groups and stuff like that. It was going to be 3 days of education. And so we did the first one, was out in Utah, and it was just a phenomenal experience, just being able to be there with that level of talent and just the people that were there. But it was super duper white guy, right? I mean, it was really it was noticeable, very very yeah, even for Utah. And so afterwards we were talking to each other, and I was like, look, we gotta, and I understand that part of the issue is also when you do a retreat like that it's, there was a certain cost involved. It was hard for people to travel. There's just a certain level of, and really, I think, regardless of, of your race or whatever, if you're in your 20s and you're a new game designer, it's hard to, fly out to, Salt Lake City for a week potentially and do this thing. So, I tried to think about what we could do to, and certainly we wanted to try to attract people, just in general, but I felt that one of the hurdles was just the financial impact of trying to get people out there, but I thought it would be really helpful to get there. So that was why I started New Voices in Gaming, which was specifically to give scholarships to people, so basically to cover people's travel expenses, hotel expenses, basically a completely free trip to these types of conventions to get there and meet people. But more importantly, and I got this idea from talking to some other people that have been doing this for Metatopia convention and stuff like that. They also have kind of scholarship programs. Is that it was important to have a mentorship aspect to it. Right. If you just bring people and just, here you are at this conference, have fun, goodbye.
Right.
That's not super effective. So we had a mentorship part of it also. So a one-on-one mentorship. So in the end, originally I was planning on doing 5 people at the first one, and the support from so many different game publishers was phenomenal, and individuals. I would name some of them, but they're all on the website if you go to New Voices in Gaming, and I'm sure I'll forget some. But we actually expanded it to 10, and I had no problem getting mentors that were there, and it was like a murderer's row of designers. I mean, we had Rob Davio and Elizabeth Hargraves and Martin Wallace and Dominic Krepchutz and just all these people, Cole Worley, so just fantastic people to meet with each one person one-on-one and work through their designs and help them and stuff like that. And the foundation, we paid for all their travel, all their meals, all their hotel and the admission, so it was completely free for them to go. And it was just a terrific experience for everybody, I think, including the mentors and the students. And we were all set to expand the program and do more this year. Mm-hmm. We had a whole bunch of things lined up to send people to Unpubs. We've been talking to Unpub. We've been talking to, again, with Tabletop Network and other conventions. But of course, everything got blown up this year. So we've been trying to come up with some other ways. So I've been supporting the Tabletop Mentorship Group. They give out they had a speaker program and a micro grant program, which we support. And there's a bunch of other things that we support. So it's been interesting to try to come up with, and a lot of charities struggle with this of how do you, at the end of the day, we impacted 10 people, right? Is that going to be enough to make a dent? Now, those 10 people have gone on, some of them have gone on to do great things. One of them just got hired by Prospero Hall and moved out to Seattle and is working out there. It's so, how do you leverage that? How do you kind of expand and grow that program? So that's New Voices.
Nice. I mean, so the POCs. I'll use that term. The persons of color get asked this all the time. I get to ask this of the white guy. So so according to the white guy's perspective, and I know you're only one person, but just throw it out there. What do you think? I mean, you mentioned before about just monetary and a thing, but what do you think is the barrier where we look certain way as a country, but our hobby looks still so white? I mean, is there something that we're doing wrong? Is there something that's in the games themselves? Is there what from your perspective do you think is going on there?
Um, I'm purely speculating. It's hard for me to say directly because I haven't had this experience, right? I haven't been that person in that trying to get in or seeing what's interesting. I think that though that a really big part of it is, I truly believe that just, seeing yourself up on that stage is an important thing. And so I think that it's a self-perpetuating kind of a thing that, if somebody looks at a panel of game designers and, they look a certain way, then you say, I can be that, or maybe that's not for me, right? Or if there's certain subject matters like, hey, I'm interested in, like rap gods or something, right? Or what, I'm interested in that type of a thing, and you go looking for a game on that or something like that, or every game you look at is about elves. I don't know, that may be, or about, World War II tanks battles, right? That's going to appeal to a certain thing. And it just, I know that I'm sure that there's some aspects of it that's more active of shutting people out. I haven't personally seen that. But I think that there's enough passive, shutting people out because of just self-perpetuation of these are the type of people that go to these events and these are the type of people that do this thing. So that's going to be the type of people that do it in the future. That I think that that's enough to explain what we see. But I also can tell you, look, as somebody, I went to Origins, the second ever Origins that was held in 1978. Okay, in Chester, Pennsylvania, and there was zero representation. There was not a woman to be found, right? There was nothing, right? It was held on a college campus, and it was, and right. So it's way better than it was before. It certainly is not representative of the country as a whole, but I think we're making some strides. But I think it's just, it's one of those things that I'm hoping that time will help. But I think that getting these, actively bringing in, working to bring in more people and to make them more visible so that, the younger kids are coming up and saying, hey, this is something I could do, I think is important. And it's a generational turnover that it's going to take right. time, but I think we got to be somewhat active to make it happen.
I'm glad you put it that way because, you can see the alternative perspective saying, well, there's no one stopping you. The door's open. Just walk in and go and do it. And, so you have to ask the question, who's holding the door? If and who's on the other side of that door? And that matters too. Like you can't just give a person an open door and say, go. You can't just give a person a scholarship and say, go to this convention. There has to be that connection on the other side, people that are successful and, maybe they're a little bit trailblazy, but that's how we make change. And we don't need to fight that. So no, I think it's valuable just even to hear your perspective and say, you see it too. And I'm hopeful that enough people on the other side of the door see that and see that that's importance as well. Okay, so
we're talking about books.
That was GameTek.
So I actually have 3 books coming out in 2020, which is just insane.
Right.
So the GameTek book came out. Well, this is the republication. The game book was in September, but then in the very beginning of this hellacious year, I had my book with MIT Press come out called Achievement Relocked. Which if you have not seen it, I think you would find particularly interesting. It's specifically about the psychology of loss aversion and its use in both video games and board games as a design tool. So I'm really pleased with that one. That's probably more on the academic side, but I'm very pleased with the way that one came out. And then at the end of this year,
a lot of loss aversion in my therapy. Absolutely.
Okay, sure.
You have a choice in life between do you want to be happy or do you want to be safe? And that's essential tension of the human brain. So like being happy incurs risk, incurs these things. And then a lot of people just kind of default to Loss aversion. They default to safety,
Yep.
and they wonder why they're unhappy. and to play with that tension that I find, and I guess that's part of why games appeal so much. Like there's so much of games and gaming appeals to kind of like root issues in psychology, which is really, really, really cool.
Yeah. And as a game designer, I find it's really useful to understand those things, particularly as a game designer. I mean, any artist, I think it's, the more you understand about humans and the way they think, the better potentially you can be. But I think in game design in particular, I mean, look, if I'm making a movie or I'm writing a book, right, I have real tight control over the emotional arc of the reader or the viewer or whatever. If I'm designing a game and I'm trying to bring emotion into it, it's very difficult. It's more open and sandboxy, and, it's hard. I think it may be physically impossible to actually scare somebody in a board game. But you can do it in video games too. Video games that you have control over music and pacing and lighting, and you can do jump scares, and there's all kinds of things you can do. I think in board games, the biggest tool that we've got to deal with player psychology is loss aversion. Of the threat of taking stuff away, and that's what, whether it's a push your luck game or whatever, right? If you give the player something to lose, that's your emotional lever as a game designer. So understanding that and the different ways to use that and the way that manifests, I think, can be really useful.
And that book is called
Achievement Relocked.
And that will be coming out at some point.
MIT Press. No, that's out already. That came out in February. Okay. And
nice.
And then I've got a book coming out this month called Game Production. Subtitle is Prototyping and Producing Your Board Game. And this doesn't really cover game design at all. It's about the physical aspects of being a designer, how to make prototypes, how to make cards, how to combine spreadsheets to make your life easier, how to do graphic design, rules, layout, all the production stuff, then how much it costs to print cards and cubes and boxes and trays. And so it's all that other kind of stuff that's, as you're doing the design, what it is. So I'm very excited about that, because I think I frequent game designer forums and stuff like that and try to help people out on Reddit and Facebook and whatever. And like 90% of the questions are all like, does this card look good? Or how much does it cost to get cubes? Or, that kind of stuff. How do I make a board? So I'm hoping that'll be a good resource for people.
And also for playtesters. And that I mean, I don't know if I'm ever going to make a foray to the game design. We'll see. But in terms of, I've tried playtesting, and it's very difficult. It's surprisingly difficult to be a playtester, because you basically have to recraft the game. And you say like, oh, I'll help you out, and then they send you a file.
Yeah.
They send you schematics, basically. They look like schematics, and you have to kind of craft them and construct them. So, I mean, with a book like that, I mean, because I have a lot of so this will appear on the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast, and we have an active Discord with some playtesters, and we're hoping to get more people into playtesting, because that's a fun way to participate. Does your book kind of appeal on that level, and to have lessons for that?
I don't get as much. A little bit into playtesting, but not quite as much. So there's some other resources that are really good for that. But yeah, I mean, I guess how to give a couple of pointers. Like it's about how to actually, I mean, if somebody sends you print and play files on what to do or whatever, then this will help you, sure, get it made, make a prototype and stuff that you can do it. I mean, I personally, when I'm designing, I hate just sending somebody a prototype, unless if I do that, and I did it somewhat for the pinball game, is I ask people to record themselves playing. Because I get the best information I get is from watching people play my designs. Because then I can tell when they're bored. I can tell when you get that body language. And that's like even playtesting over Tabletop Simulator, it's been so challenging because it's just not the same. You don't get the same kind of feedback.
Right. So it's funny enough that you mentioned that game. We can go right into it. We can go right into Super Skill Pinball for Arcade. Yes. So I will have a review on the Dice Tower, a very unique review, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Around the same time this one comes out, and we also did a playthrough in the One Stop Co-op Shop. Michael Kelly did one. I think this game has been really well received. I'm not what are you seeing in terms of the feedback of and like what are you seeing A and B? Did it surprise you how well the game is being received now?
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, I am finding it surprising. I mean, in a sense, or not, because every game I come out with, I am convinced that it is absolutely the best game that's ever been made ever in history.
This is the one. This is the one.
But no, I mean, the reviews have been really good. I mean, Tom Vassell called it his. He said it was the best roll and write
Yeah.
ever, basically. And we like immediately sold out of the first print run. I'm happy that you were able to get a copy because they are completely gone. They're not even like just like gone from distribution. They're basically gone from all the store shelves too. We do have more coming in over the next week or so, and they've actually already gone back for a third printing. So that's been gratifying. And we are working on an expansion. That's one of the nice things about it. It's very expandable. You know, just make new tables and do new
different
stuff.
boards and
yeah. So I've been excited about it, and I think you know, I think part that helped. And it was completely WizKids' idea, so I have to give them total credit. And they didn't really even thinking it from a marketing standpoint, because from a marketing standpoint, it was a terrible move. But, you know, back in April when the pandemic first started, you know, Zev Schlesinger, formerly from Z-Man Games, now for WizKids, came to me and it was like, hey, we had this great idea that, you know, everybody's stuck at home, we're looking for things to do. We would like your permission to, you know, let's take a table, make a print and play of it, put the rules as a single sheet, and, you know, just put it up there for people, free download. They can just play it and, you know, go for it. And, you know, so we did that. And, you know, I think it got a lot of popularity and exposure from that. I mean, it was way too early from a marketing standpoint. Again, this was like April, May, and the game didn't come out until September. So, you know, from a buzz standpoint, it wasn't the right time to do it. But, you know, I thought it was really nice to hear people that were playing it and were having fun with it. And it's a kind of game you can easily play over Zoom or whatever. So.
Right. And, you know, you can print it. It's one sheet or two sheets, depending on like if you wanted to print the.
And those are still available, actually. You can still get it. And actually they put a second table up too. So there's two out of the 4 tables you can just download from the WizKids website.
So we should probably explain to people who don't know what Super Skill 4 Arcade is. It is a roll and write game for 1 to infinity players. You know, however many four pencils come in the box. It's so deceptively simple. Like because you look at the board and it looks very busy, and it's like, what is happening? There's all these like spaces and everything, but then it's like, you know, roll 2 dice, move the pinball where the number is. You just, you know, or pick one number and roll and put in the space. And then if you know pinball, and that's one of the question I want to ask you was, if you know pinball, it's easy. Like, you know, how pinball flows. It's fairly easy. So then this game feels like kind of a love letter to pinball. Like you really have to kind of know it. I make an assumption. Like, is this one of those games where like you really kind of pulled from the recesses of your knowledge of pinball? Or was it just like, you know, or are you not as into pinball like that?
I love pinball. Yeah, I grew up with a pinball machine. We had a Fireball pinball machine when we grew up. In fact, the very first table, the Carnival table, the original foundation of it was Fireball. And then they rethemed it. But and then I had a Cyclone machine when I was adult. We got a house. Then I bought my own machine. We had a Cyclone, and then we had a Star Trek Next Generation machine. And now I've got a Hobbit pinball machine. We've always had a pinball machine in the house. Never more than one. I'm not one of those people that's like, you know, 15. I have 2,000 board games, but I only have one pinball machine. Got to draw the line somewhere, right?
Right. I mean, you have like that's what I got the sense of. I got the sense of like the person who designed this game loves pinball.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I tried to bring that in of, you know, all the different things that, you know, different pinball machines have done over the years. I mean, there's so many different, they call them toys or gizmos or whatever, that they do some cool stuff. And how do you express that in a board game and give the feeling of it without, you know, you're not going to 100%. It's not a simulation of pinball, right? It's evocative of pinball.
So the review I did, so I do a line of reviews I call them games for a healthy mind, games that I've used in therapy with people, and I kind of talk through what benefit that the client gets. So Super Skill Pinball was one of them, and I've played it once in therapy, and I share the story in the dice tile, but I'll share with you since you're right here. So it was a couple. One of the things I do is a couples therapist, and the wife is struggling with early onset and like going into Alzheimer's. So there's degeneration, and I've seen them for years. So I've seen the degeneration happen in the wife, and so it's like part of the therapy is helping her kind of stay engaged with stuff, and part of the therapy is helping the husband help her, because the husband is, has his faculties. He's kind of physically, has some stuff going on. He's had to go to early retirement, but now he's in a position where he has to basically care for his wife, and it's very, very challenging. So I do the best that I can. I play a lot of games with them. I play Can't Stop, Yahtzee, just like puzzly, simple, abstract games.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried. This was a total like shot in the dark. Just knowing what little I know from them, I tried Super Skill Pinball, and it is like the, so that for a gamer the rules are simple, but for a muggle, and they never really progress past that. It's a little bit difficult, so I had to kind of like adjust some rules, and it's like, we won't keep score the first round, but I'm going to show you the things, and I kind of taught it in a way that emphasized flow. Like, this is what the pinball is doing, and then so like I taught that corner ball. I think the corner ball is the easiest one. So then they have like 4 levels, and then in that second level there's the bumpers. Right. So then I kind of demonstrated that the sense of like, okay, this is a push your luck, or not a push your luck, but like, you can really rack up ding, 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 ding. And like that kind of caught him. And he's like, wow, he remembered, because like, he's like, oh, wow, we remember playing pinball when we were kids. So then it's like, I taught him the game so that he could play the game with his wife. And what ended up happening was the wife would roll, like she was in charge of rolling. That's all she had to do. Just roll, and then he would ask for numbers. Give me a 2, honey, and she would, and she would, oh yeah, there. And then they started kind of connecting on a deeper level. Like, and this is a woman that has been sick for a long time, and she was happy, and they were like reminiscing, and they were talking about things, and like they were wearing masks because it's like socially distanced and everything, so I couldn't like see the face, but like you can just tell when somebody's happy, like their eyes, like their little crow's feet, and and like it was just. So they're playing, and she's like laughing because, and he's doing a lot of it, like he's playing it up, right? Like, and that's why I wanted to commend you, because like the soul of pinball, if pinball has a soul, that is definitely in this game, and he was able to kind of get a piece of that and offer that to his wife and like involve them, and so like they're doing the whole thing, and we do that third round, and I don't really keep score. And I let him nudge freely. It's
Sure.
like, okay, just turn the dice, whatever you want. You get 3 of them, go for it. So then they stop, and then it's like, that was a good session, and they were both really happy. And then the husband asked the wife to go to the waiting room for their adult children to pick her up, and then he's there, and he just starts crying, and I mean,
I'm gonna start crying, man.
I'm getting emotional just remembering it. I almost break down in the Dice Tower review too, because I'd say the same story, and like, because this is so beautiful every single time. There's like this like big hulking man. He's like 6 foot. He's like bushy and everything, and he says like, for a little while, I had my wife back, and we were connecting. It's because of this silly pinball game, and like I was, and it was like, he's like, just thank you, thank you for that. And it's like, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be able to get to use pinball again. Like, that was such a constellation of like, because they were big Yahtzee players, and they had that pinball background, in their history. Like they'd bonded over that. But the fact that you were able to create a game that has a low enough rule set, and made lower by obviously some stuff, and also has enough of the soul of pinball in there to kind of give a couple like that access and help them achieve emotion, was just, I mean, that's amazing, dude.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. Thank you for that.
It's amazing. Like the next week they were just kind of back to whatever they were doing, but just for a little bit, it was really nice.
Yeah, I mean, the more that I've designed, and the more that I play, even, for all the decades that I've been playing, I mean, it's the more that I come to appreciate that, games are about creating a social space where people come together over something, right? And, a lot of times it's, if especially, for those of us who, maybe in our youth or even now, we're more socially awkward and stuff like that, right? It's hard to be at a party where it's just totally free form interaction. We just got to walk up to people and talk about. But if I'm sitting down and I'm playing a game of Codenames with you, then there are rules of how we interact with each other, and I've got a basis of of a structure or something like that that can help to bring people together and introduce it. And there's so many elements of human society are like that, beyond games, into rituals, and that they believe in sporting events and religion and political activities and all kinds of other things. That I just see games as kind of the purest expression of a way of connecting people. Even in a solo mode game, you're in essence connecting with yourself, or with the designer, or with other people that are doing the same activity, or things like that. So
you're creating a different headspace. Like, I mean, life is scary and games are stable.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think you've talked a lot about on Ludology about the magic circle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the magic circle being like, okay, this is a break now. The rules are different now. This is, out there, anything can happen, and usually something scary and mean and dumb. Here, there is, even if you lose, and even if there's like bad things happen, like you mentioned before, design for loss aversion, gift threats, and all that kind of thing, it's all stable.
Right.
And that's kind of what I try to create when I use games and therapy, is like create that stable space, because when you do it, where there's stability, there's no anxiety.
Yeah. I think that's, very, very smart and very sensitive way to use that.
Good try. Yahtzee, though. Yahtzee is definitely the one that gets used in terms of rolling rights. I've tried a bunch, and you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny because it's like, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but like, so I got into a little bit of trouble on the Dice Tower recently. So I've done the healthy mind games for a couple, and I reviewed Uno, and Uno is like by far my most played game. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Like, and every time I try to kind of replace Uno with another game, like a quote unquote better game, like they're like, okay, that was nice, let's go back to Uno. So it's like, okay, I have to kind of like deconstruct my understanding of what is a good game and kind of go with the flow. So it's like I've kind of like come around on it. It's like I gave it a seal of excellence 9 out of 10, and people are like, I can't believe you did that. That's a terrible game. And
games are inherently subjective, right? B, they're so dependent on the group that you're playing with, and it also depends on what you're trying to get out of it, right? I mean, you're not playing Uno for a deep strategic experience. You're playing Uno for the social experience, right? And
exactly.
the people that do it, and the inside jokes, and everything else that does it, right?
And the house rules, and
You should get together with Rich Summer, man. He's an Uno fiend.
Who's that?
That's Rich Summer.
Oh yeah.
he's a guy you want to talk to about Uno.
Oh man, I gotta get him up. I gotta hit him up.
You should. You absolutely should. You got into a giant Twitter fight with the Uno people.
What was the Twitter fight? I'm so curious.
It had to do with skipping or reverse, draw 2 cards. I don't remember. There was some whole rules minutia over Uno. I don't get. It's a whole subculture I don't get into. But yeah, I mean that's and that's why it gets me. I won't say frustrated, but I mean, like the last podcast interview I did. The last question was like, "Oh, so what's your favorite game?" It's like, what are we doing? How many people do we have? What are we doing? Who are you? Who's the group I'm with? I mean, it's there's. I don't have that, and I have this like zero patience for game snobs.
Yes.
Even though I kind of used to be one to a limited extent, but look, somebody wants to play, Bunko, and they enjoy that, then that's fine. I'll show them other games if they're interested, but I'm not going to say don't play that. It's stupid. Play this instead.
Yeah.
Or if you liked Bunko, you might also like this.
Or like you're playing this game because you don't know better.
Right.
Like you like Uno or Monopoly, like, okay, well, they don't know better. They're either like too quote unquote dumb to learn a better game, or they are anxiously awaiting when we invite them into our tent, they'll discover and you know what? That's not, I just don't, I've tried. Tried all sorts of people, and it's like they like and there's reasons why I like their game. So like Monopoly, right? I mean, like I guess from a game designer perspective, I mean, what is your thinking about Monopoly? Like, do you share the general consensus in our community that it's like, okay, this is kind of a bad game, or do you see like aspects to it?
Oh, I mean, I think there are better games, but and I don't think if it's one of these accidents of culture, right? I mean,
Okay.
it's just some things in culture. There's just like the big roulette wheel that spins, and wherever it stops, that's what happens to be popular or goes viral. And there's computer games or whatever, and we see it even now with board games. Um, like Wingspan. I'm probably going to get into trouble, right? But Wingspan, the way it took off,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's a fine game, but or Terraforming Mars. It's a better example because Steven, I can make fun of Steven.
Yeah. I'll
Terraforming Mars
scrub
is
the
fine.
Wingspan reference.
Is it the fourth best game ever made or whatever it is now? I don't know.
Hmm.
It's got its strong points. It's got its weak points. It depends on the mood you're in. It can run
Right.
too long, whatever. I mean, all this stuff. It's just, just for whatever reason, things kind of capture the viral zeitgeist, right? And they just,
Hmm.
and they get their own momentum. And Monopoly's that way. It got its own momentum. But if you play it by the real rules, it's fine. But it also, I mean, it was very indicative of its age. It was also, it's very much a loss aversion-y game, right?
Hmm.
The only person that doesn't lose every single thing they have is the winner.
Hmm.
It's just the games that we played as kids are made to be horrible to kids. It's kind of ironic in a way.
It's like the
Um,
fairy tales that about like all like nastiness and everything. They're made
exactly.
to scare
Yeah.
you.
Right. So yeah, I mean, Monopoly's fine. If somebody really wanted to play Monopoly, I'd sit down and play Monopoly. I'm not gonna say absolutely not, never. I'm never gonna sit down at your table. Yeah, hey,
Hmm.
let's play. Why not? And then afterwards, let me take a fast food franchise. And I'll show you that.
Yeah.
So
Although I guess like my perspective, having played Monopoly in session a bunch of times with a bunch of people, I think, and I'm so glad you mentioned the loss aversion thing because I think modern game design overall is kind of like averse to people having a bad time at the table. Like everybody is involved. There's no downtime, and make sure the scores are tight. That's a good game is when the scores are all tight and everything. And I think with a game like Monopoly, people are seeking that experience of like winning and just like being the ultimate winner, and not just being a winner, but like having a fistful of dollars and
yeah,
like making doing the thing, making it rain and
yep.
stuff. And I guess I feel like quote unquote more modern game design doesn't go there. Like it does, it's too afraid to have other people not have a good time, or what afraid is probably too stigmatizing a word, but like it's concerned with the more people having a good time. Where a Monopoly would be like, okay, only the winner has fun, so be the winner.
Right. Yeah. And that goes back to also, then to the commercial, what people are looking for in the marketplace.
Right.
And if Settlers of Catan had come out in 1927, would it have been popular? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of classics that came out with Diplomacy and stuff like that were Acquire, things that
Another
came
one,
out before.
Diplomacy. Only the winner has fun.
Well, yeah. uh, the Diplomacy, that's a whole other conversation. I'll come back and we'll do another 2 hours on Diplomacy. But like Acquire, I mean, there's plenty of games like that. But yeah, I mean, but that's the emotional. But look, I talked about like loss aversion in the book and how you use that to drive emotion. The emotion, I'm not saying emotion's bad, right? And I
No, not at
emphasize
all.
that in the book all the time.
Not at all.
Some of the greatest moments in gaming come from exploiting loss aversion, right? For a negative effect. I mean, in the video games world, the example I use in the book, which I think is perhaps the purest example, is in Portal, the weighted companion cube, right?
Right.
Which, is it too soon to do spoilers for Portal? I think the
You're
game's like
right.
20 years old, right?
I think what was it? They never released the Portal 3, did they? It was only one.
Yeah, there's no Portal 3. But yeah, in Portal, they give you this cube that's got hearts on the side and say you have to carry it through the whole level, and you get more and more attached to it. I mean, they do everything in their power on that level to make you attached to it, and then in the end, they make you throw it into a fire, right?
Right.
And it's one of the most memorable things it's completely gratuitous, right? I mean, it has no gameplay impact. It's strictly thematic. It strictly gives you some insight into the
GLaDOS, yeah.
sadistic nature of the computer and stuff. But it sticks in your mind because you force the players to go through that ringer. And that's the same thing with there's board games where you want to do that. There's Intrigue, the game Intrigue, which is perhaps the nastiest game ever made, where you make a deal with somebody, you can just completely ignore it immediately.
Oh,
It's like, if I give you this, you give me $3, and somebody says, okay, I agree to that, and you give it to them, and they say, I'm not giving you $3. That's perfectly legal in that game, right? And it's, it's like diplomacy, but that's an experience, and people will go for that experience. People will go to scary movies, right?
hmm.
But not everyone's going to go to scary movies.
So maybe okay. I'm gonna give this a shot. I'm
Okay.
not an experienced game designer, but like I think so. Another conversation that people have is around dice and having like I think we're getting to a point in game design where there's an aversion, a general aversion to just kind of like zero sum, right? Either you win or you lose. So like, more and more dice games are like using like kind of multi-sided dice, or they're using like, okay, if you roll this, you get this. And if you don't, and if you roll lower, you can go over here. I think of a game like, Pulsar or Kingsburg, where you roll and you could still go somewhere with your 1 and 2,
Yeah.
or something like that. So like, I mean, would you, I don't know what question I want to ask, but like, is that what I'm thinking about with loss aversion, where like on a design perspective, you're kind of letting the players off the hook with letting them get away with low rolls? And is that something that you kind of consider?
Well, I think it depends on what you're going for, right? I mean, one of the questions I get a lot is like, when you design a game, do you start with a theme or do you start with the mechanics, right? What do you start with? And I mean, I always say neither, right?
Right.
I'm an experience-based designer, right? I think about what I want the players to feel like and the stories I want them to tell and stuff like that, right? Even with like Super Skill Pinball, it's like, yeah, I want people to kind of feel like they're playing pinball and make those choices and have it get narrower and narrower. And like, oh my God, I just, kind of like a slot machine effect. Come on, 6. We need that 6. Let's roll.
By the way, I forgot to mention this part of the story. The husband, his big complaint about pinball is that you run out of flipper numbers, and he's like, you run out, you can't keep going.
Game's got to end, man.
The game's got to end. But he's like, no, I'm so good at pinball. But I was back in the day, I used to do
You
this.
could keep it going forever. Yeah.
So
The biggest knock on the game has been that it's too long, which is interesting. So yeah, so he's on the other side of it for me. He thinks it's too short
because he came at it from the pinball perspective.
Right.
Like he associated his experience with pinball of like being a pinball champion and just like being there for hours. His name was on the high score list and everything, and so complaint registered anyway.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep that in mind for next time.
So
So
like at least one endless board. Like if you can design
right.
like one board that has an endless
What
like
it has an infinite combo.
yeah, exactly. Like
Okay.
make the infinite machine or whatever they
I'll
call
do
that.
that. Yep. And see how long people actually play it for before they just hang it up.
I have a feeling that would be that would inspire some contest or something like that if you made that board a perpetual motion machine board and see how long people last.
So, I think the key thing is, at least for me, when I sit down, I'm aiming it at somebody. I'm thinking about the experience that they want to have and what they want to do, right? And so, and that will guide me to how edgy do I want to be, right? If this is, if I'm designing a game where I want people to kind of build their engines and they're constructing something and they're building an empire to reach to the stars, right? I don't want to give them toys and then take their toys away or smash their factories, right? That's not what the fantasy is about, right? If the fantasy is about, it's you're conquering the world and you have to, lay all your enemies to dust before you, then I'm going to be mean and I'm going to build those tools and to allow people to do that. So, I mean, I feel the experience, a lot of games and that, maybe this is overly broad, but they're basically like wish fulfillment and fantasy kind of stuff. That's why I think a lot of the themes are, heroic and larger than life, and we keep coming back to the same stuff. And, you want to give people the tools to do that and tune the level of interaction for the target market you're going for. If you're designing a game for families to play and you don't want the families to be killing each other at the end, then you got to soften it up and you got to give, then it's going to be minor things. So, yeah, I again, there's rooms, and maybe I'm sounding wishy-washy and all this stuff, but there's room for all this stuff, and I'm an omni gamer, there's room for the diplomacies and squad leaders of the world, and there's the room for, the Kingsburgs and, the splendors of the world where you're kind of in your own little world.
I guess like So I guess I'm thinking about it in terms of trends, and I'm
Mhm.
not sure if you think that way about games. Like, okay, the games that I've played in the last couple of years seem to share these qualities of, like, the dice. I'm playing fewer and fewer games that have like that zero mitigation dice, because they don't, like, the designers don't want to give players the feeling that they've had a nothing turn. Or
Yeah,
like like games have less downtime. We had Rob Davio on the show on the old podcast, and he's like, okay, no downtime, no downtime, no downtime. I got to
right.
kind of reduce that. Where the older games, they didn't care. you
Right. Yeah. I mean,
downtime
when
all day.
I used to play war games all the time, right? And we literally had games where it would be like each player would take 3 hours to do their move,
Ugh,
and you would go, I would, but that was manageable because I knew it
sure.
was going to be 2 or 3 hours. I would leave. I would have a sandwich. I would watch a movie, and then I'd come back, and it'd be time for my turn. Oh, what happened? Oh, look what happened. So there's ways you can deal with it. But yeah, I mean, part of that is, yeah, is um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of cultural, but it's just trends. It's just the latest trends of what it is, right? I mean, in the beginning in the 70s and the 80s, we had Cosmic Encounter, we had all this other stuff where you were like really beating on each other. It was all crush stuff, right? Then we moved into the 90s and the Euros, so then we had Settlers of Catan moved in, and a lot of Knizia stuff moved in,
Mhm.
which was much more about kind of trading and efficiency and doing a little bit. Everybody was growing, but everyone in Cells of Catan ends up better than they started, but somebody ends up more better. And so there
Right.
was that theme for a while, but then there was a rebellion, and it kind of bounced back, with the Ameritrash movement and that stuff, right? Then the pendulum swung back, and all of a sudden there was other games that came out that were again about just dudes on a map and chaos in the old world and all this other stuff where you can really destroy other people's positions. And now we're in kind of this hybrid period, which I think is great. I mean, I don't feel like it's just
Mhm.
the soulless Euro game where it's just very abstracted and and it's not just it's a combination of a lot of different things coming together. But I'm sure there's going to be another. We're not at the end of this evolution. It's going to go back. And honestly, we're seeing it more. It's just shooting off in a zillion different directions at once. I mean, after um, there's always going to be trends like in movies. All of a sudden you'll see a spate of movies that are all about the same topic. Well, after Love Letter came out, right?
Micro games, yeah.
Everyone had an 18 card micro game that they
Hmm.
were doing, right? And that was the trend. And it was like, oh, games are getting smaller and shorter. And if you go to a publisher and it takes more than 30 minutes, nobody's interested. Okay, well then, then Gloomhaven came out with, you know, so it's
Right.
these things move around.
Okay. We still have to talk about one last project, which is your Kickstarter that you designed with your son,
Yes, Nova League
Nova
is the name
League.
of the game.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I try to set weird challenges for ourselves when we talk, and because I'm not doing this, just for commercial success and trying to, I do have a job, so
Hmm.
I can afford to do stuff for fun. Um, so you're probably too young for this, but uh, I don't know if you're familiar with this game actually first came out in the 40s, is the vibrating electric football. Okay. So it's a big board made out of metal, and you put these little figures on it, and then the board vibrates, and
Oh,
little
okay.
guys run
Yeah, sure,
around.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So,
I never knew what it was called, but yeah.
well, I just call it generically vibrating electric football. It's called electric football, I think, in general.
Hmm.
But um, and so I played that a ton as when I was a kid, but as a toy, right? It never worked really as a game. I mean, I think it does because I've gotten more into it now, and it does if you really like fine tune the bases and groom your guys and really play with your board. But I love the idea of these little guys running around on the board. And so I don't even remember how it came up, but at some point Brian and I were talking, and we came up with this idea of, hey, we should try to make a new game using the vibrating board. And so we worked, and we actually came up with a way of making a real slick modern game with different characters, every character having special abilities, and sort of still a sports theme, but a lot of different fun, very quick playing, has a lot of skill to it in spite of the random action of the vibrating board.
Hmm.
And we ended up
Like, what kind
partnering
of
it.
skill? Like dexterity skill, strategy
No,
skill?
no dexterity strategy.
Okay.
Actually coming up with good plays and making use of the special abilities of the characters to do stuff. And I am just absolutely just tickled pink about this game. I just love it to death. It's so much fun to play.
It's the one.
It's the one. And we've actually partnered with Tudor Games. Tudor Games is going to be publishing it, although this is the new area for them. So they have made electric football as basically their only game since 1947.
Wow.
And there's tournaments and there's all kinds of stuff around it. But, so we met with them and we're like, hey, maybe it's time for a new game. But they know nothing about this world. They really don't know much about Kickstarter and stuff and just this sort of game market in general. So, we're really working together on this. And it's coming out on Kickstarter in April. It's should probably look it up, the URL. It's novaleague.net is the no dashes or anything, just novaleague.net is the URL. And you can sign up for the mailing list there. And, I think it's an ideal Kickstarter thing. We've got fantastic sculpts for all the different characters. It plays really fast. It plays in about, 20 to 30 minutes. It's super easy to teach. I could teach it in literally like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, but it still has a lot of interesting plays and fun things you can do. And a better player will beat somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. Although there's a healthy dose of randomization with the vibration. And you talk about endings. We talked about endings before. I'm going to bring it full circle now because I'm a podcasting professional.
Veteran of 10 plus years.
Talked about colonoscopies. So one of the things we have, the way the structure of the game is that, what we found out is the way you normally play the football game is you hold down this button and it vibrates the board and you release the button as soon as the ball carrier is touched by an opposing player. Okay. And the problem is that can take a long time. And while that's happening, guys start running around in circles. It just gets stupid, right? It just doesn't work. So what we found, we did a bunch of experimentation, is we found that actually the first 4 or 5 seconds, the guys generally go in the direction you want them to go in. Okay. Once it gets past that, things get squirrely. So the way the game works is you just push the button. Everyone kind of sets up. So in the first play, everyone sets behind the 20-yard line. And we set it up ultimately so each team has their own ball. Both teams have a ball. And then you push the button and it just goes for 5 seconds and then stops. It's got an automatic cutoff. And then from where the characters are, now each character has energy, and now you can spend energy to do all their special abilities. So you can do special abilities, and plus there's common abilities like throwing the ball. Every player can do. You just pay an energy and you can just move the ball to a different player anywhere away or whatever. But the initially when we were playtesting it is you could actually throw the ball in the end zone. It's like one of your guys went in the end zone, you could throw the ball for a touchdown and pay an energy and send the ball down there, and then you'd score a point and you'd reset. And functionally it worked as a game and it made sense thematically, but it was not exciting.
Right.
It wasn't fun at all. So finally we went back, after messing around with this, we just added in a absolute hard and fast golden rule in the game, which is that the ball can only cross the goal line during the 5 seconds of vibration. Okay, right? So during all the abilities with all the crazy special powers where you can displace characters and you can move things around, you could swap places with other characters or whatever the heck it is, right? The one rule is you can never do that in such a way that'll put the ball into the end zone. And also the end zones shrink. The end zones move in over time also. So it also drives the point to a conclusion, which also helps the football game because guys do, it helps things drive. And just adding that little thing. So now when you push the button, it's the 5 seconds. So even if somebody's like a millimeter away from the end zone, you can reposition your own figures to like form a little wedge right at your goal line, right? You can reposition guys right to the goal line in front of them. And sometimes crazy stuff happens during that 5 seconds. Somebody spins around and they'll go through and they'll bounce off of 3 people. But you always score a point during that 5 seconds when you're just watching, you're powerless to do anything, and it's incredibly exciting. So that was the way that we kind of took that lesson of, and the game always ends on a score, right? That's always the way the game ends. So it always ends on something crazy happening during that 5 seconds where somebody bounces off or turns around or goes into the end zone, because you have to end the vibration period. And especially when it's me, my guys run into the end zone and then out of the end zone all during the same 5 seconds. And then it stops vibrating and they're out. And I'm like, no, dude, what are you doing? So it just has those fun and exciting moments.
Mhm.
So that little rules tweak of, you know, you can only score during the vibration just makes the game.
It's funny. I guess we were talking about like trends. A trend recently is like kind of bringing back this old stuff and modernizing it to the
Yeah.
new. You know, I mean, you can only
Yeah.
have so many ideas.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
it's
not.
restoration and stuff. You know,
Mhm.
there's people that are making a living at doing that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
There's a
know, like I
lot of
mean.
fantastic games in the past that can be resurrected.
Mhm. And so, like, I mean, this was more of an activity than a game. The older one, it was just like
Right.
random chaos, but it was a cool toy. And like back, you know, like before we had all these kind of things happening, this was a way to kind of entertain yourself. And it's like now, seems like you really like, you know, like the restoration stuff. I'm waiting for my copy of it. What is it? The Dark Castle, the one.
Yeah.
what
Dark Tower.
Dark Tower, that's the one. You know, and that is definitely, you know, I have no idea what else is coming from the past, but I'm happy to see that you are absolutely bringing back some of those toys. If they bring back Atmosphere, I'm going to be just I'll be beside myself.
Well, you can still do that. I think they're all on YouTube.
We need a modern version of that game. The actual board experience is pretty terrible. So.
Yeah, that's true.
This was Geoff Engelstein. We had so much fun chatting. We went all over the place. We went to psychology and loss aversion, and we talked about pinball, and we did. This was one of the most interesting conversations that I've had in a very long time. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a blast, and I hope that's it's some magical future point we'll actually get to meet face to face and hang out.
I mean, you're from New Jersey. I'm from Connecticut. We're not
Yep.
that far away. Hopefully, cons open up at some point. You know, we can get meet up at a DexCon, you know, in Jersey or some Metatopia you mentioned before. One of these other places that'd be really fun.
Yeah, Metatopia.
Um,
I'm always go to, and Dex. Yeah, they're real close to my house, so it's easy for me to get to those.
and so you are very available. You are on Twitter. That all I had to do is send you a private message and you respond right away. And you have the books coming out. Go ahead and check out the GameTek book. And what are the titles of the other two?
Game production and achievement relocked.
Mm-hmm. Available all on Amazon or wherever you get your
Yep.
local books. You cannot find Super Skill Pinball anywhere.
By the time this comes out, it should be back in stock places.
Okay.
It'll be coming in.
And a print and play. The website is still live for the print and play.
Yeah, that one you can get.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything else, anywhere else that people can contact you?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at G Engelstein, which is GengelStein. That's probably the best place to find me. Yeah, and that's basically it.
All right. So this is Jason reminding you, if you could change your mind, you could change the world. So until next time, later, everybody.